The operating room had become eerily quiet, save for the frequent tones of the pulse oximeter, which had begun to decrease in pitch. This was a reminder that something bad could happen to the patient very soon. Try to angle the tip up a little more. Kurt was startled at the difficulty they had encountered in placing the endotracheal tube. Glancing up at the monitors, he noticed that the oxygen saturation had decreased from 100% to 85% and was now falling ever faster. This was ominous. The video laryngoscope presented a tantalizing glimpse of the patient's airway on the screen at the bedside. But for whatever reason, the anesthetist could not manipulate the tip of the tracheal tube into the airway opening. "Okay, come out and let's ventilate with a mask." Sandy, the nurse anesthetist, was always well prepared, and he was startled to see the earnest concern on her face. She quickly pulled the blade out and placed the mask on the man's face. Already his lips and mucous membranes had become dusky, an unpleasant purple color that reflected oxygen deprivation. Moreover, the tones emitted by the pulse oximeter had begun to sound frighteningly low. "Am I going to lose this guy?" Kurt wondered, pulling on the man's meaty jaw as forcefully as he could to aid the anesthetist's attempts at mask ventilation. The patient had been escorted some minutes before down into some deep and featureless plane of unconsciousness. Almost certainly he would have no memory of this brief departure. Sandy fumbled a bit with the clear mask, then managed to apply it tightly to the patient's face, making a firm seal. "Come on, Christopher," Kurt murmured, imploring the unconscious patient. "Let us get some oxygen into you." The saturations continued to drop. The patient, a heavily muscled, obese stonemason, showed little evidence of chest rise. They'd been able to deliver the gas readily with a mask before they started poking around in the man's throat. Had they stirred up so much swelling in the delicate tissues around the opening of the airway that ventilation by mask was no longer possible? As Kurt pondered this, a sense of dread began to settle upon him. It was extraordinary how quickly things could change in anesthesia. 5 minutes earlier, he'd been joking with this affable, corpulent blue-collar worker who'd been injured in his line of duty. He had suffered through a frustrating runaround at the hands of the workers' compensation system and had finally been granted the right to have surgery on his injured knee. Christopher was bright and garrulous, and after a bit of sedation, managed to humor the entire OR staff. Now, unexpectedly, the induction of anesthesia was not going well. "There's a blip," Sandy announced as a bit of exhaled carbon dioxide registered on the monitor. But the oxygen saturations continued to fall. The two understood that there would be a lag between any actual improvement and the monitor's display. "He's going to start dropping his heart rate if we don't get some decent ventilation. Do we have a laryngeal mask airway ready?" Though he tried to disguise it, the tone of Kurt's voice betrayed his concern. "There's a size 5 over there, open and lubricated. You want me to put it in?" He looked at the anesthesia machine, on top of which had been placed an odd-looking airway device, the laryngeal mask airway, or LMA. The purpose of the instrument was to cover the opening of the larynx and deliver gas to the airway. Despite its unimpressive appearance, the device had saved many lives. The exhalations of carbon dioxide from the man's lungs continued to register on the monitor, a confirmation that at least some volume of gas was now regularly being delivered. This was a lifeline in the mind of the anesthesiologist. He didn't want to interrupt the process. But why wouldn't the saturations come up? He had begun to assist Sandy with the ventilation, adopting a 2-person, 3-handed technique for this plump, plethoric man. He pulled fiercely on the jaw, edging it forward in an attempt to open the airway, felt the moisture begin to coat his hands inside his gloves. "I'm sure he has sleep apnea. He told me he snores but had no other symptoms." No one commented. The orthopedic surgeon, Michael Daly, stood at the foot of the bed, a mixture of impatience and expectation on his face. This was his patient, but it wasn't his fight.
to keep listening to this audiobook. I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.